I thank the Minister for giving way. It's been widely reported that the taxpayer is having to pick up the tab for £15,000 of legal costs and damages incurred due to the actions of the Honourable Member for Chippenham, who is rapidly becoming known as the Honourable Member for Chipping In. Can the Minister confirm that the 15,000 number is correct? And can he say whether he thinks it's morally right that the taxpayer should be picking up the bill for the outrageous lack of judgment and behaviour of one of his colleagues?
What I think would be absolutely outrageous will be the taxpayer having to pick up the bill of a future Labour government, to be absolutely frank. As I have just explained, the record of the honourable gentleman's party in government.
I thank the honourable member. I mean, on the point on the tax burden, it's clear that it's actually the highest that it's been in 70 years. But my question, he raised the point about national insurance contributions. I assume he's seen the email that the Chancellor of the Exchequer has sent to all Conservative Party members, making it very clear that the plan is to scrap NICs in the next Parliament. Does he accept that that is the government's plan, because it's in that email in black and white? And does he also accept that that would leave a £46 billion black hole in the public finances?
I think the honourable gentleman is misrepresenting what my right honourable friend the Chancellor said yesterday. I have Hansard here, and I can't turn it up quick enough to be able to give him an exact wording of what the Chancellor said, but basically what he said was when the economy was in a fit state to do so, and when the economic conditions allowed, it was an ambition, not a promise, not a commitment of anything at all. It's just, as my Honourable says, a commitment of travel. And so I hope, well, I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman, but I hope he's not going to misrepresent what the Chancellor said, because I'll have to get it in Hudson. I'll give him one more chance.
As I'm sure he'll be aware, I'm an avid reader of emails that have been sent from the Chancellor to Conservative Party members. He says in it, we want a simpler, fairer tax system where you only pay tax once. If we stick with our plan that's working, we'll be able to make progress towards that goal in the next Parliament. If that's not a commitment to scrapping NICs in the next Parliament, leaving a £46 billion, why don't they just own up to it and then explain how they're going to fill that black hole?
I'm really grateful for the honourable gentleman for intervening me on the second time, because I now have the exact words from Hansard, which I'm going to quote. I'm going to quote back at the honourable gentleman. He said, and I quote, "When it's responsible and when it can be achieved without increasing borrowing and when it can be delivered without compromising high-quality public services, we will continue to cut national insurance as we have done today so that we can truly make work pay." So I don't think it sounds the honourable gentleman saying it too. I think he's misrepresenting the words of my right honourable friend the Chancellor, and I hope that he will not persist in that line of question.
From these people about what they're actually promising for the future. I give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He's making an excellent speech. Doesn't he think it's absolutely extraordinary, given what happened after the so-called mini-budget, that the party opposite seems to have learned nothing and is still making all sorts of unfunded commitments which could potentially wreak havoc in our economy, just as we saw last time round?
Well, I think it's extremely serious, and I'm not surprised they're trying desperately to get off it at the moment, because we can all see the risks that they are posing.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a real pleasure to follow my honourable friend, the member for Easington. We on these benches talk a lot, and rightly so, about the Conservatives crashing our economy and sending mortgages up almost £3,000, rent up 10% and food prices up 25%. We talk a lot about the fact that the Prime Minister is utterly blinkered around the truth that he's gone from being a low-growth Chancellor to a no-growth Prime Minister, with the introduction of Rishi's recession, and that working people are paying the price in this cost of living crisis. We talk a lot about the Tory waste, the fact that we've seen the Prime Minister blow £7 billion on COVID loans, fraud, and £500 million on a Rwanda plan that has flown 3 Home Secretaries to Kigali, but not a single asylum seeker. And we know that the tax burden is at its highest for 70 years, whilst debt has rocketed and is still going up. But we probably should talk more about the underpinning mismanagement of our economy and the broken economic model which has seen Tories underinvesting, turning our country into a stagnation nation. We have a record high NHS waiting list of more than 7 million people. Schools that are literally crumbling because the Prime Minister cut the school building budget when he was Chancellor. 90% of crimes going unsolved, with rape victims waiting 3 years for their day in court. And we have 3 times as many children living in poverty today as we did 6 years ago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the reality is that the past 14 years have been an omni-shambles. And as a result, nothing in this country seems to work anymore. And yet the British people are being forced to pay more and more for less and less. And what ideas have the Conservatives put forward to fix this mess? None whatsoever. Instead, they resort to pilfering Labour's policies like some sort of embarrassingly bad tribute act. When the cost of living crisis hit, we knew we needed to support households through it. So we proposed a windfall tax on the excess profits of oil and gas companies. The party opposite eventually caved in and delivered that policy, but poorly and riddled with loopholes. And this week, they've made a feeble attempt to mimic our policy of ending the non-dom tax loophole. Just think, if they had acted when Labour first suggested ending this loophole 2 years ago, they would have generated £6 billion into the policy areas that we suggested. Then they could have delivered 3.8 million extra operations, 1.3 million emergency dental appointments, free breakfast clubs for nearly 4.5 million children. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Conservatives are followers, not leaders. They are slogan mongers, not servants of the people. They believe in government by gimmick rather than the hard graft of governing in the national interest. Labour, meanwhile, is taking a long-term, responsible approach to get our economy back on its feet and growing again, which is why we have our 5 core missions. We'll get businesses growing and put demand back into the economy, starting with our new house-building programme for 1.5 million homes over 5 years, creating new jobs, getting young people and families the housing they need. We'll deliver clean energy by 2030 and switch on Great British Energy. Our transition to a modern economy will deliver 500,000 good jobs, lower household bills and make our energy supply secure from Putin. We'll get the NHS back on its feet and fit for the future, bring down waiting times with the biggest ever workforce expansion, including 17,000 more doctors and nurses and 2 million more available appointments. We'll put 13,000 police back on the streets and halve the number of incidents of violence against women and girls. And we'll spread opportunity for young people everywhere by shattering the class ceiling through better early years provision and improving technical education. Instead of the government's hands-off, it's not my problem, Gov approach to the economy, we can deliver an active industrial strategy, backing our businesses to make, buy and sell more in Britain. This includes Labour's £3 billion steel renewal fund. And with that, I am urging Tata Steel to step back from the cliff edge, which would cost 2,800 people in Aberavon and Wales their jobs, and not to do anything that can't be undone before the next general election. And what a disgrace it is that the Conservative government has given £500 million to Tata to make 2,800 people redundant. We will work with industry to secure a bridge to the new economy so that steel companies can seize the opportunities of the future and Britain can maintain its sovereign capability to make its own steel from scratch. This vital security issue in the dangerous and turbulent world in which we live. If we want to get Putin's boot off our throats, then we have to sustain our vital steel industry. We on these benches are also committed to supporting small businesses. We'll legislate to tackle late payments, unlocking £20 billion in unpaid invoices, and we'll scrap business rates and replace it with a system that is fairer for bricks and mortar businesses. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are the kind of growth measures we need to get Aberavon, Wales and Britain firing on all cylinders. Last year, the Prime Minister said, "We've turned the corner," and promptly plunged Britain into a recession, an economy smaller now than when he entered Downing Street. Mortgages through the roof, house building fallen off a cliff, worklessness rising, homelessness has never been higher, crimes going unsolved and rape victims waiting years for their day in court. We have rivers full of sewage, the perfect metaphor for the stench of decay that is emanating from this clapped-out government. And households, £870 worse off under the Prime Minister's tax plan on average, with the Prime Minister giving just 5p back for every 10p taken from our constituents. He is giving with one hand and taking twice as much away with the other. That's not a plan, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's a scam and a con from this government that has run out of ideas, run out of energy and run out of road. We need an election this spring, and we need a Labour government that will rebuild our public services, re-energise our economy and get our country back on track. Thank you very much for giving way. He hasn't yet mentioned the government's Damascene conversion on scrapping the loophole for non-DOMs. But on this point about what that could have generated, if they'd listened to Labour and done this 2 years ago, would have generated an extra £6 billion of revenue, which could have paid for free breakfast clubs for nearly 4.5 million children. So on the point of childcare, does he think that's relevant?
The honourable gentleman gave quite a list, a wish list earlier on, which by my calculations could come out to be quite expensive. I don't know if he's had conversations with the honourable lady on the front bench. But in order to address the point he raised on non-DOMs, we have scrapped non-DOMs, we will be scrapping non-DOMs, but we will be replacing it with a residency-based system, including measures that will encourage and incentivise further investment into the UK, because we'll be implementing transition measures. Didn't hear the opposition talk about those. Those transition measures are likely to encourage £15 billion of additional investment into the UK. Non-DOMs at the moment pay about £8.5 billion of taxes. We want to welcome people. We recognise those with the broadest shoulders must absolutely carry the greatest burden.